Whenever you're drafting, you're always making a decision that comes down to 2 or 3 different players, and we're going to help you make those decisions today, whether we keep, trade, or cut a guy. We're talking about 21 different players, 7 different trios, and we're starting off hot with this first trio, Ty. We are getting first round ADPs, 3 wide receivers. It's Brian Thomas, Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and the way we're going to structure this is we'll both tell you our keeps. We'll go to the cuts. We'll go to trades. Ty mentioned this on the audio podcast. We are not saying that we are cutting this player, right? It is just a figure of speech to say this is who we kind of value third among the 3. So Ty, out of Brian Thomas, Nico Collins, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who are you keeping?
I am personally keeping Nico Collins. Not that I don't think the other 2 have as high of a ceiling as Nico Collins, but we talked about it in the most recent mock draft. Nico Collins, we've seen him do it, although it was for a very short period of time. The guy has top 3 upside of the position, whether you like it or not. And I think Houston is going to have a bounce back season on offense. You're going to see a lot better play from CJ Stroud. You get Nick Caley coming over from the Rams, so a little bit of a different offense from the Bobby Slowick offense. So again, not that I don't think Brian Thomas Jr. and Amon-Ra St. Brown are, not as good. They are still going to be top 10. They also have top 5 upside. But I think Nico just has that little bit more than the other 2.
Yeah, right now in best ball drafts over on Underdog Fantasy, join us using the code fellas. But Amon-Ra, wide receiver 6, Nico Collins, wide receiver 7, Brian Thomas, wide receiver 8. I would keep Brian Thomas. I think what we saw wide receiver 4 last year as a rookie, the step forward we're projecting them to take, Liam Cohen coming over, right? Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, neither looked good. If we can get average to above average quarterback play on that offense, I think we're really going to see Brian Thomas take another step forward, which is kind of crazy to say after what he did already last year. But yeah, I'm obviously, if you listened to us last year, I was super excited about Brian Thomas. Last year, he was the rookie I banged the table for all season long. Again, I'm back in this year. My trade, Ty, was your keep. It's Nico Collins. I have them very close, right? You want to talk about nitpicking. I don't even know if I can give a true reason why Nico Collins is beyond Brian Thomas. Like, for me, they're just perfectly right in the same tier. Very great, very good upside attached to quarterback who we've seen kind of the spark from. We've seen, hey, he could be really good young quarterback. We saw it down year last year, new offensive coordinator this year. So I like both. I'm just slightly Brian Thomas over Nico Collins. Who would your trade be?
It was Brian Thomas Jr. So we are quite literally the inverse of each other on this one. Again, it was close for me as well. And ultimately, the reason why Brian Thomas is my trade is because when you look at quarterback situation from CJ Stroud to Trevor Lawrence, not that I don't think that they're not capable quarterbacks or anything like that. There's a lot more on the line for Trevor Lawrence. And we've seen, I'll just say, failed years from Trevor Lawrence that he hasn't really stepped up and taking the step into that next echelon of quarterbacks. We've seen CJ Stroud and what he can do. So maybe the best way to say it, I'm buying in more on a Houston Texans bounce back than I am on Jacksonville in 1 year with Liam Cohen.
For sure. And that is fair. And I'm know someone's going to rip me in the comments now saying, I can't believe you just compared CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence. I understand Trevor Lawrence has had a lot more years to prove it and hasn't quite. CJ Stroud probably is a 2 tiers ahead of him. So I understand that. I was just trying to draw a parallel. Why do we hate Amon-Ra St. Brown? Because that's what people are going to ask right now. Oh my gosh, these guys are Lions haters. It's because they're Vikings fans. How can they hate Amon-Ra St. Brown? Why do we hate him, Ty?
Because we think Jameson Williams is really good. We think Sam Laporta is really good. I'm kidding. We don't hate Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's just kind of the last man left. Like, that's just how it worked out. And Amon-Ra has shown year after year that he has been one of the most reliable pieces in fantasy. So maybe it is a little bit, maybe you can fault us for ceiling hunting a little too much on this one, but I think you and I both also say like coordinator change, like this, there is change happening with Detroit that we haven't seen the past 2 years. And we don't know how that's going to affect everyone else. So that's why just Amon-Ra just kind of slips down to our cut.
Yeah. I mean, if you watched our tier ranking video, all three of these guys in the same tier. I'm not mad if you say Amon-Ra's ahead of them. If you say he was a wide receiver 3 last year, wide receiver 5 points per game in half PPR formats, I'm not betting against that. It just feels like Jacksonville and Houston, their offenses really can only go up. And it does feel difficult to kind of see with Ben Johnson leaving, with Frank Ragnow retiring, for this Detroit offense to take another step forward. Obviously, Amon-Ra, if you're wide receiver 3, there's not much more of a step forward you can take. But we do, believe in Jahmyr Gibbs getting better, Jameson Williams getting better, Sam Laporta getting better around him, which if it just takes away 10 targets at the end of the year, that's enough to move him behind these other two. So that's all we're saying. That's all we're nitpicking at. If you do like these discussions, we're going to have them all off season long, excuse me. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, join in on the fellowship as we get ready to formally announce, right? I keep teasing it, but formally announce next week our draft guy giveaway, our 4,000K sub giveaway. So we're trying to get to 4K subs. I shouldn't say it like we're already there. We're moving to get there, but we're going to do a giveaway once we do. So we will formally announce that next week. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and you're around for that. We're going to switch to running backs now. We're going to talk about right around that 2-3 turn in drafts. Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown. If you would have said at the beginning of last year that we're going to have a discussion, a keep straight cut discussion on Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, and Chase Brown, you would have said, oh my gosh, did Josh Jacobs fall off that much? No, Josh Jacobs was awesome, but so is Bucky Irving and Chase Brown. So Ty, who is your keep between the three of these guys?
My keep is maybe a bit surprising because you see some of the names on this list and who I've kind of hyped up. It's Josh Jacobs.
Oh, thank God. All right. Whew.
It's Josh Jacobs. I don't think people realize. I think the trap that people may fall into is when they hear the name Bucky Irving, they're going to get the recency bias and they're going to go, look what he just did in the last 6 weeks of the season. And boy, do we have news for you about that one.
Yeah, I am Josh Jacobs as well. The dude was phenomenal last year. I don't expect that to change too much. 300 carries, 1,300 yards, 15 rushing touchdowns, another 30 carries, or 30 receptions, 350 yards through the air. Like, I just don't see a world where that takes a catastrophic dip, right? He wasn't working with insane volume. He had 4.4 yards per carry. It wasn't like, or insane efficiency, excuse me, right? They use him around the goal line. They're going to continue to do that. Matt LaFleur proved, hey, I have a back that I really trust. I'm going to use him. I'm going to keep using him. I have no reason to kind of vary from that. This is where I really do think it comes interesting. Your trade candidate. Which one of these two guys you got next in this list?
It's Chase Brown.
Ooh, all right.
It's Chase Brown. Okay. For the pro Bucky crowd, this is the stat that you need to hear. At Bucky's highest, right at his peak from weeks 12 to 18, that last 6 weeks of the season, he was the running back 9 in points per game in half PPR. Chase Brown was the running back 8. Josh Jacobs was the running back 6.
Oh, there you go.
So again, we're not saying that Bucky Irving is a bad pick, or we're not saying that any of these guys are bad picks, but context does kind of matter. Just because Bucky Irving ultimately carried you to a fantasy championship does not mean that there weren't other players that outproduced him over that same span. That's what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, I'm back and forth. This one's really close. And I ultimately think I am going to pick Chase Brown because of the offense that he's in. If I'm picking an offense that's going to score more points this year, I'm going with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I'm going with the fact that Chase Brown's pretty much in the Joe Mixon role, which we saw with full seasons Joe Burrow, him put up a running back 4 finish on terrible efficiency, right? I'm not expecting Chase Brown to all of a sudden go hit 5 yards per carry. I'm expecting 4.1, 4.2, grind it out, but get enough receptions, score just enough touchdowns that he's above Bucky. Bucky, I think, is going to be good again, but are we going to really rely on 5.5 yards per carry? That for me is, that's something that I struggle to rely. Even guys like Jonathan Taylor, right? That's not something you can continuously rely on year after year. I think Bucky's going to be phenomenal. I think it is very close between him and Chase Brown, and it's a lot closer than I want to admit between those two and Josh Jacobs. I just believe in the offense that Chase Brown is in, and the fact that I think Bucky's still going to have a Rachaad White thorn in his side enough that as a top 10 running back, it's going to be a little bit annoying.
Agreed.
Yep. You don't have anything to add to that one, Ty. You're just, See, it's tied it up. You're good with all that.
I look. You can order it whichever way you want. Yeah. I said earlier, this is our preferences.
Yeah.
And just because we don't agree with your ranking doesn't mean that you should be getting mad at us. Get it? We're slandering some of your guys. I get it. Don't be too mad at us though. I hope that you're hearing us out.
Next, we're going to go back to the wide receiver position. We have the wide receiver 13, wide receiver 16, and wide receiver 18 in underdog best ball drafts right now. It is Terry McLaurin, Tyreek Hill, and Davante Adams. Right, a couple of veterans here, some different situations. Obviously, Davante and a new one. This, I think, we're going to have some disagreement on, Ty. So I'm interested to hear who your keep is in this situation.
My keep, Davante Adams.
Oh, really? All right, maybe we won't have disagreement.
Well, maybe should I just change the answer just so we can have the conversation?
No. Tell the people why we're in on Davante Adams.
It is the best situation that he's been in since Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, and obviously he's not the alpha now in this Rams offense because you do have Puka Nacua. But Davante didn't show any signs of slowing down, and if I'm not mistaken, there was a legit conversation that, hey, Garrett Wilson could still be the guy over Davante Adams. Obviously, that did not come to fruition, and Davante Adams did kind of emerge as the 1A or at least the preferred guy to Aaron Rodgers, which makes sense in hindsight. But Davante is going to be just fine in this Rams offense. Just because he's a number 2 guy doesn't mean that he's going to be taking a step back. He's definitely going to command targets, especially when you look at who else Matthew Stafford is going to be throwing the ball to. I mean, we're talking about Tutu Atwell, talking about Jordan Whittington. We're talking about Terrence Ferguson, who we like here. Okay. Like Terrence Ferguson with the Rams is a nice little landing spot, but we're not expecting things right out of the gate from Terrence Ferguson. And we're talking about Tyler Higbee then until Terrence Ferguson steps in. So this is truly going to be the Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua and Davante Adams show. And there's plenty of work to be had here for Davante.
Yeah. I mean, the Rams threw the ball 560 times last year. 2021, I think they threw it over, in their Super Bowl run, they threw it over 600. If you think Puka Nacua is going to get 200 targets, there's still 360 to go around, and I guarantee Davante Adams is going to get enough to be fantasy relevant if Puka Nacua decides to go out and break like this single season record. So there's a lot to go around. I talked about it too when we talked about on our tier show. Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 5 for 6 weeks alongside Puka Nacua last year, so he can keep it up. He was wide receiver. Davante Adams was wide receiver 10 in points per game, ahead of Terry McLaurin by almost a full point per game in half PPR formats. We won't even talk about where Tyreek Hill finished. Oh, it was the wide receiver 33 in points per game at 10.5. But Ty, who is your trade in this case?
This one I struggle with.
Yes,
because there's a case for each one of these guys. There's a case for Terry, there's a case for Tyreek. And maybe that's the best way to say it is I'm just going to take the offense that I think is going to score the most. And I think it's going to be Washington, even though, yes, they did just trade for Deebo Samuel. So there's, we're not competing with Noah Brown and De'Ami Brown and whoever else was in the wide receiver room for Washington last year. But the volatility with Tyreek scares me, man. And like, and when I say volatility, like the range of outcomes for Tyreek is as wide as I remember it being in his entire career. It feels like so. That's why I probably lean Terry. There's a case that, again, if you think that Tyreek was affected too much by his wrist injury last year, a healthy Tua should get this offense back on track. Sure, I can understand it, but I the risk is too much for me to say, yeah, you know what, I would put Terry 3 and put him ahead of him.
So I am team Tyreek. For me, I'm looking at a guy who had back-to-back 1,700 yard seasons. And I'm not at the point where I believe that just evaporated overnight to be what he was last year. I think healthy Tua, I do think he mentally kind of checked out of a lot of these games. And I think the wrist injury played a factor. I don't think the wrist injury is the reason he was that bad, right? He might have lost a half step. That is definitely a possibility, but I just believe in what we've seen in the past from Tyreek. I think you're going to get back to some of that. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a top 3 wide receiver again, but if he's top 10, right, he could be the best of these 3 wide receivers for sure. Like we've talked about a lot. The top 10, being a top 10 wide receiver this year really means something because the top 10 is loaded with good. I mean, the fact we have AJ Brown as a borderline top 10 guy in our rankings should tell you all you need to know about how good the top 10 wide receivers are. And then the cut for me, Terry McLaurin. I like Terry. My worry is he put up pretty much the same season that he has.
Yeah.
Except he had 12 touchdowns. Right. And so that's my like he is 77 to 87 receptions, 1,000 to 1,150 yards every single year. And then instead of 4 or 5 touchdowns, he put up 12. That's my only concern. I understand Jayden Daniels can take another step forward. He could have a bigger year, but that is my concern. And it concerns me enough to put him at 13 touchdowns, excuse me, not even 12. Holy cow.
Yeah, no, it's really a difference of, are you going to shoot for the moon, or are you just going to try to hit it down the fairway? And I think when the floor is as low as I think it can be for Tyreek, that's what pushes me to fairway. But if you want to chase the ceiling with Tyreek, that last year was a fluke, and maybe it's not top 3 wide receiver, but if it's still top 10, Terry can't match that unless he gets 13 touchdowns again. So it is quite literally a difference in preference, just like all the other ones.
No, it definitely is. And like, that's the thing. Like, we're talking about all these guys are in the same tiers for us. They're not, I'm not pulling rank. Like, they are very close for a reason. And so you have to nitpick when you have these discussions. And you can say, well, why is it worth nitpicking? Because you're going to have these decisions to make in your drafts. Before we get to the last 4, and I promise we'll talk quarterbacks, tight ends, we'll have some more running backs, wide receivers for you. We're going to take a quick break and hear from our friends at Underdog Fantasy.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
We are back. And like I said, before we went in the break, we're going to talk a little quarterback here. We're going to get some young guys who one of them's known as a scrambler, but I think the other 2 are pretty underrated when it comes to how they use their legs. It's Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, and Kyler Murray. And it's, when I say those 3 names, having those 3 as my starting quarterback, I'm not feeling like awesome about, but I sneaky like it. So I'm interested to see who you have as your keep here.
It's Caleb.
Ooh, all right.
Yes, I am buying in on Ben Johnson, kind of jump starting, I should say. like Caleb's rookie year was not disappointing, but it's the fact that he was the number 1 overall pick and we touted him as one of the best quarterback prospects that we've seen coming out of college that made it feel like a disappointment. But tell me, you're gonna get, again, last year was 80 carries, 500 yards, and no rushing touchdowns, 20 passing touchdowns, 3,500 passing yards, 6 interceptions. If we get rushing touchdowns from Caleb Williams, like, why can't Caleb finish inside the top 10, pushing top 8, top 7, right? And if we're expecting, again, this Chicago offense to kind of hit a stride, to find the end zone more often, I kind of want a piece of it with Caleb. And not saying that Bo Nix, who threw 29 passing touchdowns last year, won't have that. Not saying that Kyler Murray, who had 5 rushing touchdowns last year and had almost 600 rushing yards, isn't going to be a good pick or a good player as well. This is probably just me buying in that Chicago's offense is going to be the most productive out of these 3.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna get some hate because I'm not gonna say Bo Nix either. I'm gonna go Kyler Murray as my keep. I think just the rushing upside for me, it was a down year for Kyler, and he's still a top 10 quarterback. I mean, it objectively was gross. He only had 21 passing touchdowns. He had 15 turnovers to 26 touchdowns. He only had 38 passing 3,800 passing yards. And like I said, he was still a top 10 quarterback. So I'm buying in on him bouncing back a little bit, them starting to figure it out, getting Marv, more included. I understand nothing's really changed, right? There's not this exciting thing. It's just when your floor is 18 fantasy points per game, I just tend to trust you, especially for where he's going in drafts. My trade is Caleb Williams. I'm not going to spend too much time on talking about it because it's really everything that you said is the reason I like Caleb. I think he was sneaky on the ground last year with over 500 rushing yards, almost 500 rushing yards. Just didn't have a rushing touchdown. He didn't look as bad as I think some people think he did throwing the ball. And now hopefully a better offense. Anything that's not Shane Waldron is going to be a better offense, especially when it's Ben Johnson. So buying in on that. Who do you got as your trade?
My trade is actually Bo Nix. Did you know that Bo Nix from week 8 until the end of the season, he was 4th in passing touchdowns?
Jeez.
Ahead of Baker Mayfield, ahead of Jaden Daniels, ahead of Patrick Mahomes. Like, I know that some of those guys have some elite rushing upside. Like, he had more than Josh Allen. Josh Allen goes as like the quarterback 1 in drafts. He will in your redraft leagues then as well when it gets closer to the season. But for me, what we saw from Bo Nix, I saw enough of in the second half of the season compared to maybe Michael Penix in the last 3 games of the year. I saw enough of Bo Nix over 10 games that let me feel, or that makes me more comfortable saying, yeah, you know what? Bo Nix, I would prefer over Kyler Murray, and I'll transition into him being my cut. It's not that I don't think Kyler is a bad pick. Again, that's the theme with all of our cuts, is that they're not bad picks or bad players. My worry is that this Arizona offense doesn't take another step forward. It doesn't. It is similar to what we saw last year, which is good. It's not great. And it's just kind of stuck. I don't want to say it's stuck in a purgatory of some sort, but if we see lack of like passing efficiency from Kyler, yes, he had 3,800 yards, 21 touchdowns is not great. And yeah, you do make up for it with the rushing work. But if that Arizona offense is similar to what we saw last year and it doesn't take that jump into the next, the next range of productive offenses, not saying that he's going to be a disappointment, but it wouldn't surprise me then when Caleb and Bo Nix finish ahead of him. And it could literally be where Caleb is quarterback 7, Bo Nix is quarterback 8, and Kyler is quarterback 9. Yeah. That's a very realistic finish for each of them.
Man, I'm looking at the Bo Nix stats, and I feel like I made a mistake. Gosh, he was good over the last half of the season. You talk about week 8 on, week 5 on. He was quarterback 5. 21.5 points per game. He averaged more points per game than Jaden Daniels week 5 on more than, or no, not more than Jalen Hurts, excuse me. 28 passing touchdowns in 13 games. Oh, gosh, he is good. He was good. I hate saying that so much. I hate that Sean Payton made me hate this guy because of Sean Payton. Like, if he went to any other team, I'd be a Bo Nix guy. But because he went with Sean Payton, I can't like him. Like, that's, it's so disgusting. So it's just personal against Sean Payton is the only reason he's like, looking at these stats. That's, I just can't make, man.
Well, and you know, the other thing I'm realizing too about my preference of Caleb, then Bo Nix and Kyler, it's the state of the rushing game in those offenses as well, where Caleb, you got DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson. I think they lean more on Caleb versus Denver. Could be a little more balanced with RJ Harvey.
If Dobbins comes in now.
Maybe J.K. Dobbins now, which
would not hate that.
I would be much more of a fan of his ADP than an underdog because that is outrageous. But Kyler with James Conner, there's some merit to that. It's not the only reason, but there's some merit to it.
I know you tried to do that. I know you wanted to set up this transition perfectly, so we'll just take it. We're talking James Conner, Chuba Hubbard, and Kenneth Walker for our next keep trade cut. End of 4th round, beginning of 5th round running backs here. Guys who you probably wouldn't feel great if they were your running back 1. But I'm feeling pretty good if they're my running back 2. Who are you keeping out of these 3? Because I'm still deciding who I want to keep.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe the best way to say it is this. I know who I'm for sure cutting in this.
Let's go that way.
Trio.
Let's go that way. Who are you cutting?
I'm cutting Kenneth Walker.
Woo! He's the earliest ADP.
I know. And it's not that I honestly believe it's because people expect James Conner to kind of fall off going into age 30 and that they don't think that Chuba Hubbard can be as productive. They think that last year was just kind of a fluke now that, there was no Ted McMillan, so they kind of needed to run the ball. Like, I can see the argument for having Kenneth Walker going ahead of those guys. I don't agree with it because Kenneth Walker, for as good as he is, the dude is just a walking injury waiting to happen. And I hate using the injury argument here, but the dude hasn't played a fully healthy season. I know James Conner hasn't either, but what we saw with Arizona last year is that they're willing to give him the rock until the wheels fall off. Versus Kenneth Walker, we finally saw the passing game emerge, but now we're changing the offense again. And it's not Geno Smith, it's Sam Darnold now. Not that Sam Darnold won't throw him the ball. I've got the same volatility concerns. I've got the same range of outcome questions that I did for Tyreek Hill, where Kenneth Walker, I see a path to being a top 15 guy, but I also see a path where he's actually probably going to finish, or I shouldn't say he will finish. He could finish between 20 and 24. And it is solely because he either can't stay healthy or we see more Zach Charbonnet. That's the other thing. He's got the best running mate out of these 3. James Conner with Trey Benson. Sure, we may see more Trey Benson, but we know that Zach Charbonnet, is a little more proven than Trey Benson. And Chuba Hubbard, we're talking about Rico Dowdle and Trevor Ettiene. So that's why I have Kenneth Walker as my cut.
I'm really close, but I'm going to go Chuba Hubbard as my cut.
Whoa.
So, and I think he's your keep, and I was kind of sneaky thinking that. So we'll see.
He was.
My worry is he was 3rd in team snap percentage last year, 3rd in team attempts. Is if that comes down, I don't think that Carolina scores enough touchdowns to make it worth it. If Trevor Ettiene, a Rico Dowdle gets more in the mix, right? I'm not saying they're going to get in the mix enough for it to be 50-50. I don't believe that. But if it comes down from 68% of snaps or attempts to 58, which to show you guys that 58%, that's where Derrick Henry had 58% of attempts on his team. Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, Rico Dowdle last year, Josh Jacobs. So it's not like it's that's a realistic spot. That's my concern, is that if the volume comes down, we're not going to see him be efficient enough or score enough touchdowns to kind of negate that. So that is my worry there. That's why he's been cut. So we'll keep going. Who is your trade then?
My trade is James Conner.
Okay.
And James Conner is the interesting one because, again, I've kind of insinuated, if you haven't picked up on it, that I think the Arizona offense is very similar to what we saw last year, which can mean some good for James Conner. I mean, we saw him finish as a top 10 running back in 3 straight weeks, 20.2, 28.3, 24.6. So that kind of ceiling is nice. But what people don't want to talk about, or probably ignore, probably is the best way to say it, he was a running back 18 in weeks 1 through 13 leading up to that in points per game. Not that that's bad, but it's much more middle of the road, much more fairway than it is, that a high ceiling that we have kind of hoped. The intrigue, because we literally talked about James Conner in the mock draft, is that people value him as if he is lower than that running back 18, and not saying that that's his floor, but James Conner is much more of a reasonable pick than people want it to be or think that it is. So that's why I've got James Conner there. I think you can make the argument maybe Kenneth Walker because of youth, James Conner you cut because Kenneth Walker, in that same week 1 to 13 range was outscoring him on a per game basis. He was running back 12. So you can have it that way. I've just got my volatility concerns with Kenneth Walker that pushes James Conner to be the trade over Kenneth Walker.
Yeah. So my trade is then Kenneth Walker. It's 3.7 yards per attempt last year. Obviously, Seattle's offensive line, terrible. I don't know how much better it's going to be again this year. I know is Gray Zabels who they added, correct, in the draft. I think he's going to be great. I think not great. I shouldn't say that. But I think he's going to be good. I think he's an upgrade. I don't think it's all of a sudden like, ooh, we got a top 15 offensive line in the NFL. And then, like you had said, with your concerns of Zach Charbonnet mixing in a little bit more, they got Lucas's favorite player, Damian Martinez, in the 7th round. I mean, it's like if he gets 50 carries this year, that might be just enough to take away from Kenneth Walker. Who knows how this offense looks with Sam Darnold? That's why I'm trading here. My keep then, James Conner. I'm going to be honest. James Conner, it's just, he feels like Derrick Henry light, where we keep saying it's got to be done. It's got to be over. We can't believe in James Conner anymore. And then he goes out and is a top 15 guy in points per game every single year. Right. Like I said, Derrick Henry light. I'm not saying he's going to be top 5. I'm not saying he's going to be top 10, but he's 30 years old. He keeps going out there. I know he gets banged up, but he's going to give you 13 games. He's going to average 14.5 PPR points per game. I just like the consistency of James Conner. And if this offense bounces back at all, I think he benefits. You haven't talked about Chuba Hubbard. I was teeing you up there to take your Chuba love and just tell us why Chuba, because I have him as my cut. So you got to give us the pro Chuba argument here.
Because I mean, last year he was the highest of the 3 in points per game. His ceiling is very similar to these guys. Mm-hmm. But that being said, you want to take a guess at how many times he finished as a top 12 running back in a single week?
Ooh, 15 games played. I guess 4.
8.
Oh,
double
right.
it. 8 games, over half, obviously, because you can't, because obviously math joke.
Thank you, math major.
Thank you. Chuba Hubbard. I think you can look at box scores from last year, and he had games with 25 points, 30 points, 22 points. Mm-hmm. Kind of, again, like we saw with James Conner, but we also saw games with 9 and 8 and 2 and 6 from Chuba Hubbard. Yep. So I think I would understand saying, Chuba Hubbard isn't going to be my keep because of the volatility that comes with Chuba Hubbard. In my opinion, I think with what we saw from Bryce Young, with the team adding a perfect piece to their passing game in Tyrone and McMillan, the offense is able to take the step forward. And all that happens is that we don't see the peaks and valleys with Chuba Hubbard. It becomes much more even and much more balanced. But I still think he keeps that week-to-week upside that we saw last year, because we know that Dave Canales will run the ball. It's not going to be well, they drafted Tyrone McMillan, so forget about Chuba Hubbard. Everything's going to be built off of the run game with Chuba Hubbard again. So that's why Chuba is my preference. I'm right, you're wrong. Sorry about it.
It's hard to argue with that logic, I will say.
Just
a stonewall defense right there. You are right. Or I am right. You were wrong. All right, whatever. We're going to talk tight ends. We're not talking the top tight ends. We're talking if you punt a little bit on your tight ends here. Not all the way, right? But if you're like, I want tight end 8 through 10 is kind of where we're looking. Evan Engram, David Njoku, Travis Kelce. Kelce's a little higher ADP wise, and Njoku a little lower, but for both of us, we have them pretty similar. Who are you keeping out of these three? And I think I know who you are, but I want to hear it come from your lips.
I'm keeping Travis Kelce still.
Really? Okay. I was way wrong. Okay. I thought you were going to cut Travis Kelce. Yeah, no. I was 100%.
No, okay. I know that Travis Kelce is the old man in the bunch here, but I think a lot of people I feel like they're overestimating how much of a drop off he had last year. 97 catches, 133 targets. Yeah, his lowest season yard total in his career since 2013, when he only played one game and only 3 touchdowns. But I think what we're missing here is that it was not because the drop off was just in those stats. Yes, he was not used as downfield. He didn't have as many opportunities after the catch as we've seen in the past, but he's still getting looked at in this offense. And even if we see 120 targets from Travis Kelce instead of 130, Travis Kelce is still going to bring in a bunch of those. So I know that people may be scared off by the age. They saw the last, what was it? Last 6 games of the year, 7 games, when he went 1.8, 9.2, 10.3, 7, 4.7, 5.5, 18.4 and half PPR. And they're like, I don't want that on my team. It's not a coincidence that this offense changed a bit. And that's when we saw Xavier Worthy kind of pop off a little bit with Kansas City here. I think a fully healthy, fully strengthened Kansas City offense with a functional run game with Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. Yes, that's extra competition. Travis Kelce is still going to get his, man. And until I see the actual, he barely cracked 100 targets, then I'll change my opinion. But 133 targets is 3rd among tight ends last year. That has to mean something.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, obviously yards per reception aren't going to just bounce back to 11 or 12, right? I mean, but if it comes back to a 9.5 to 10 yards per reception, he sees 6 touchdowns instead of 3, all of a sudden we're talking about a guy who was the tight end 3 overall. And that's really what the difference is there. So I would agree. He is also my keep. Trade and cut probably gets a little more interesting. I am going to trade Evan Engram. He's my second on this list. This really just has to do with offense and quarterback. I like David Njoku. If I was guaranteed Flacco is the quarterback all season long, I honestly might go Njoku here. But especially just looking at what Bo Nix did last year of 28 passing touchdowns, offense was kind of clicking. Evan Engram can have that. It's Cortland Sutton and who else in this passing game kind of a thing. I think Evan Engram kind of slots in as that second best pass catcher. We saw him have 140 targets 2 years ago with Trevor Lawrence. So I'm going to bet on the upside of the offense in Evan Engram. I like David Njoku. He's my cut, obviously, because he's the third guy who I haven't talked about. But for me, I love Njoku. I think he was awesome last year. It just is worry about the offense itself. Who's your trade in this?
My trade is Evan Engram.
Yeah.
And quite literally for the exact reasons that you just said, right? Evan Engram, I heavily debated putting him ahead of Travis Kelce. I think that's more so projection than it is anything that we have substance on, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But like you said with David Njoku, there's an argument that he could be the trade, or you could literally keep him. It's just a question on the quarterbacks, man, that if Cleveland starts out slow, then you're moving on to Kenny Pickett. And if Kenny Pickett doesn't work, then you're moving on to Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. That quarterback roulette is not friendly to anybody on that offense. So,
and I did hear, I don't remember who was talking about it, but made a good point of, if you're Cleveland, why would you start Joe Flacco? Like, do you really want to go 9-8 this season and not know what you have in either of those quarterbacks? Have a middle round, a mid 15 pick and still be kind of a no man's land with a great defense? It's kind of like you'd rather let the rookies figure it out. If they're good, then obviously you're fine going into next year. If they're bad, you have another chance to try and add a quarterback. So it'll be interesting what Cleveland decides to do, but we're going to get gross with it now, Ty, on our last one here. We are. Some people I know are like, oh, these guys are only talking about fun names. No, we're going to talk about some running backs that are in interesting situations. We're going to talk about Tyrone, Tracy, Travis Ettiene, and Brian Robinson here. Go gross. Who you keeping out of those three?
I wonder who I'm actually.
I wonder
who I'm keeping. I'm keeping Travis Ettiene, man.
Ooh.
I like Brian Thomas, nice little player, nice little role filler for Washington's offense. Tyrone, Tracy, great sleeper value last year. Travis, I don't want to. I was about to say Jacksonville's offense is the best of the three, and then I'm like, wait, Brian Robinson plays in Washington. That's not fully accurate, but
time out.
I just think Travis Ettiene, not only is he the best player of the bunch here, he's the best player in Jacksonville, and I know a lot of people have kind of come out of the woodwork in recent days over some comments that Liam Cohen made at OTAs about Travis Ettiene being the guy that's nailed every detail and stuff. And everyone's like, well, he said the same thing about Rachaad White last year. So maybe this is a repeat. Or maybe he is telling the truth here. And that, he doesn't see it with Tank Bigsby. He doesn't see it with Bashal Tootin. And that he's like, Travis Ettiene is the best that we got. So I think a lot of people, again, are valuing him, not out of spite, but just they got burned last year. And they're not willing to give him the chance again. And I'm just banking on this Jacksonville offense going from ugly to average. And if that happens, Travis Ettiene can crack the top 20 because he can beat the league guy for the entirety of the year. Yeah.
No, I have no argument there. I'll Etienne's my trade. My keep is Brian Robinson. And I've kind of come back around on this. And the reason is, in the running back 30 position, I think Ettiene has a much higher ceiling. I do. So if you're looking for ceiling here, I think it's Ettiene. Brian Robinson has a role. He's going to be in that role this season. I'm the power back. I'm the short yardage guy. When we don't want Jaden get hurt running the ball, I run the ball. When we're not throwing to Eckler, I run the ball. That's what he does. You're hoping for touchdowns. He had 8 last year. The hope is he's a double-digit touchdown guy because the Washington offense just progresses enough. And for me, that's really just what keeps him up here. Travis Ettiene, like everything you said, Ty, I think he can be the number one back in this offense. I think that's why I have him as my trade. I just worry that, if he picks up an injury at all during OTAs, if, during the season, one running back looks better and they just go hot hand, that could get messy quick. That's why he's my trade. That's why I'm slightly higher in Brian Robinson. Who is the trade for you here?
Brian Robinson. Yeah. Probably just at that point between him and Tyrone Tracy, it's role and offense. And literally for the reasons that you said, what you get with Brian Robinson. And if he can crack double-digit rushing touchdowns, he may not be... Yeah, he may not have a super high ceiling, but at least it's not going to hurt you. But at the same time, we don't know what changes could be coming with this Washington offense. So that's what keeps him as a trade for me.
For sure. And then we both have Tyrone Tracy. I'm not worried about Cam Scadaboo after I saw the video of him not knowing who Calvin Johnson is. Dude has zero ball knowledge, doesn't belong on a football field. I don't know how you could play football the way he does and not know who, like, it's ridiculous. But in all seriousness, it is like Devin Singletary's getting first team reps right now. Does he mix in with Scadaboo and Tracy? Bad offense to begin with. So even if Tracy is the main guy, is that even enough to make you interested? For me, that's what all three. Is there anything else you don't want to add about Tracy?
I mean, I think Tyrone Tracy, I don't want to say he's like the new Dameon Pierce.
Ooh.
But that's the vibe that I get, at least, of the guy that like filled the role when called upon last year for the team. But this year, it's a different story. They don't need that. And yeah, like there's always a chance that like, yeah, he emerged and stepped up to be the guy that they should be relying on. But I think we do need to put into context that Tyrone Tracy took over last year because Devin Singletary just was not cutting it. And you added a Cam Scadaboo, not to overtake or be the running back one right away. But again, I think it was very circumstantial that Tyrone Tracy just took advantage of a really bad situation. And now that situation is changing now with OTAs with Devin Singletary, for whatever reason, Brian Daboll just can't quit his former Bills players, which speaking of which, hey, go sign Gabe Davis.
Hey, don't hate it.
But again, like Tyrone Tracy he's not a bad pick, but in no way do I feel as comfortable relying on him on my fantasy team unless he's my running back 4, and you're not taking him as a running back 4.
Yeah, no, and I mean Dameon Pierce, that's a great little comparison for people who don't remember. In 2022, Dameon Pierce had 225 carries. Like it was like, oh, he's the guy. And then the next year he had 140, and Devin Singletary had 100, almost 200 in that offense. So like, I understand we don't want it to be true, but these late round guys on bad offenses, I guess 2023 Houston wasn't a bad offense, but you know what I'm saying? Like it can change pretty quick, especially when they have a 3-headed monster there. So that is why he slots in last. That wraps it up for us today. Let's see if I have our media schedule up. Next week, Monday, lives are starting. Ty and I will be live on Monday. Wednesday, Lucas will be live. We have players that the experts were wrong about on Tuesday and Thursday. Running backs first, then wide receivers. Jam-packed. So you need to make sure to hit the subscribe button, turn on those notifications, because you don't want to miss a single thing. Otherwise, you might lose your league. And that's just the truth. That's just what it comes down to. But I am at Camelot FFF on the X. Tyler's at Tyler_Plath. FFL is on the X. The FFL is on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. Fantasy Football Fellas Shorts on YouTube as well. If you want our short form over there, make sure you're following along, and we will see you next week. Deuces.